Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. It's 9 p.m. IST and we are coming to you live from the WION headquarters in Noida, India. And this is Gravitas with a new look, but the same old spirit. Let's get started. People in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir are calling for freedom. The civilian unrest has resulted in clashes between demonstrators and the police personnel. We get you all the details in our top story tonight. And here's a look at what else we have lined up for you on the show tonight. Is India building a secret nuclear submarine base? We get you the complete story. Ukraine is reportedly shooting down a far smaller proportion of Russian missile attacks than it was earlier in the war. Is Ukraine's defense crumbling? India is creating a new corridor to Russia through Iran. At the heart of this corridor is the Chabahar port. We tell you all that you need to know. America is getting tough with Benjamin Netanyahu over the Rafah offensive, but will that deter the Israeli Prime Minister? We also tell you all about the booming film industry in Saudi Arabia. All this and more coming up on Gravitas tonight. Stay with us. Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is on the edge. This story is disturbing and we advise viewer discretion. The towns in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir have become battlefields. Protesters are clashing with the police. Cars are being set on fire. People are dying. There is a cry for Azadi, freedom, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It is day 4 of continuous protests. To say that the mood in POK is tense will be an understatement. In a first, Rangers have been deployed in POK. Paramilitary forces are continuously parading the towns. Internet has been suspended. Schools are shut. Offices are shut. This is what a civil war looks like. The people of Pakistan occupied Kashmir are marching to the capital, Muzaffarabad. In Muzaffarabad city, everything has been brought to a standstill in preparation for the worst. The last few days have been extremely violent. Protesters from across POK began marching to Muzaffarabad. Authorities tried to stop them in Rawalakot. Protesters were tear-gassed, lathi-charged. Paramilitary forces and the police also fired at the protesters, but nothing could stop them. The protesters continued their march, and on the way they burned government vehicles, even manhandled policemen. In one video, in fact, you can see a policeman being thrown down a hillock. In another video, a man is seen falling into a river. We've also been able to access this video in which a policeman can be seen being chased and beaten by protesters. And here you have two policemen being cornered and manhandled. We are being told that a police sub-inspector was killed in the firing by the protesters. So far, at least 100 people have been injured. 11 of them are policemen. Like I said, what's happening in Pakistan occupied Kashmir is violent. It is an uprising against oppression. It is a civil war. Towns like Mirpur, Islamgarh, Kotli have become battlefields. These are parts of Kashmir that have been under Pakistan's illegal occupation since 1947. For decades, Kashmiris living under Pakistan's occupation have been mistreated by Pakistan. The resources of their rich land have been exploited. No progress has come their way. People in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir are impoverished, as Kashmir, on the other side of the border, flourishes and witnesses record tourism. How do you think the people in POK feel about that? In POK, Pakistan is denying people their basic freedom and rights. They are fighting inflation, high taxation. People on the other side of the border are prospering. So, would you blame the people of POK for their frustration? Now, we are not justifying violence. We are only asking a basic question. Can you blame these protesters? Their demands, you see, are simple and extremely basic. These protesters want flour prices to be brought down and made at par with prices of the flour at Gilgit-Baltistan. In POK, a 30 kg bag costs 2,400 Pakistani rupees. In Gilgit-Baltistan, however, the same costs 1,100 rupees. That's a difference of over 1,000 Pakistani rupees. What justifies this? Nothing but exploitation. Protesters want affordable electricity. They are demanding that per unit of current be fixed at 3.25 Pakistani rupees. These are legitimate demands. So what is stopping the government from addressing them? There were negotiations between the protesters and the administration, but the talks failed. And now, after the spate of violence, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has called for an all-stakeholders meeting. The government has now approved a 24 billion Pakistani rupee grant for POK. This is some $86.25 million. But how will this grant be used? Pakistan has not said. Flour and electricity prices are expected to drop. The protesters are not convinced. To begin with, they want written assurances. Also, we have a question. From where is Pakistan getting this kind of money? It's easy to commit, but will Pakistan be able to deliver? Because until it does, any lull will only be temporary. You see, what's happening in POK is not some sporadic protests out of the blue. People in POK have been protesting continuously since October 2023. Protests are being organized across POK under the umbrella of Awami Action Committee. Who is in it? Traders are at the forefront. There are also lawyers, political parties. They are highlighting basic things. Electricity bills, for example, wheat subsidy, shortage of flour, rights on natural resources, transfer of ownership of hydro projects to the government of POK. People have also been protesting the illegal usurpation of land by the Pakistani army. October 2023 to May 2024. It's a long time. Has the government of Pakistan done nothing? Meetings have been held, their minutes have been published, but nothing has really changed on the ground. This blatant disregard has forced the protesters to take extreme measures. They have asked the people of POK to not pay their electricity bill. The protesters of POK also decided to observe the 5th of February as Black Day. The 5th of February, like some of you may already know, is when the government of Pakistan marks the so-called Kashmir Solidarity Day. In POK, protesters called for a complete shutdown to mark the day. They decided to rebrand the day as People's Rights Day. The government of Pakistan could not do much in the face of this insult, so it activated the non-state actors. Jaish-e-Mohammed, the terror outfit responsible for the 2019 Pulwama attack, jumped into action. It threatened the people of POK against observing People's Rights Day. And if that was not enough, on the 5th of February, the terrorists took out a rally in Rawalkot. They brandished AK-47s, bows, arrows, batons. JEM called for jihad. People's Rights Day was still observed, as was Yom-e-Mazamat, or the Day of Resistance, on the 5th of March. The protesters then announced the long march from different parts of POK to the capital, Muzaffarabad, on the 11th of May. And cut to present, there is an uprising, a revolt, calls for Azadi. People also, in fact, reports also talk about posters coming up across POK demanding that the illegally occupied land be liberated and allowed to join India. One POK activist, Amjad Ayub Mirza, called for intervention by the Indian government. In an interview to an Indian news agency, Mirza said, and I'm quoting now, India now should focus all its attention on Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and help and facilitate the independence of this occupied territory, including Gilgit-Baltistan. Is India building a secret nuclear submarine base? Reports are throwing light on a satellite picture, one that points at some construction near the Cochin shipyard. This is where Cochin shipyard is on the map. What makes people think India is building a secret nuclear submarine base here? Two things mainly. First, in the satellite picture appears to be a new dry dock. This, experts say, could be used for constructing big vessels, like nuclear submarines. And to the location of where the construction is happening. The site is close to L&T Heavy Engineering. This is the same company that is supplying hulls or the body for India's existing nuclear submarine program. Why don't I tell you a little bit about this program? Currently, India has one operational indigenous nuclear submarine, INS Arihant. It is India's first nuclear ballistic missile submarine, or what's called SSBN. Arihant, in Sanskrit, is the destroyer of the enemy. A nuclear-capable submarine-launched ballistic missile was test-fired from INS Arihant in October 2022. At least two other nuclear submarines are undergoing trials. Among them is INS Arighat. Reports say the other submarine is currently at a facility in Visakhapatnam. It is reportedly bigger than Arihant and Arikat. It has more space for nuclear-tipped ballistic missile. Could India be building more SSBNs in Cochin? You see, this is not an overnight process, it's a long process. INS Arikat, for instance, was launched in 2017. It is expected to be inducted later this year. Before induction, a nuclear submarine undergoes extensive checks. Its machines are checked, systems are checked, command, control and communications are verified. Only then is it inducted. Did you know that in a nuclear submarine, only the captain can launch a nuclear missile? He does not take the decision. The captain follows the order from the command authority. The communication itself is tricky. The submarines use very low frequency systems. At the depth of the ocean, these frequencies are prone to disruption. But at wartime, the command to fire needs to go through. So all of this needs to be kept in mind when launching, building, testing and inducting a nuclear submarine. Back to the question, is India planning to build nuclear submarines in Cochin? Is India building a secret nuclear base in Cochin? The answer is we don't know, but what we do know is that now more than ever, India needs to bolster its nuclear triad. And it has been doing nothing less, by the way. In March this year, India successfully tested Agni-5. It is a nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile. Agni-5 has the MIRV, or the Multiple Independently Targetable Re-Entry Vehicle technology. It has a range of up to 5,000 kilometers. What's more, Agni-5 is homegrown. Agni, by the way, means fire. You see, so far, there are two big defense takeaways from the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. One, missiles have become the weapon of choice. Number two, the new big war will be fought in the seas, meaning India must prepare for a war on the surface of the ocean and in the depths. Again, India is doing nothing less. We've told you how India has inaugurated a new naval base in Minicoy. We have been telling you about India's naval base in the Great Nicobar Islands. So if India is indeed building a secret nuclear submarine base in Cochin, you should not be surprised. It is much needed nuclear deterrence in an increasingly dangerous Indo-Pacific. When you have an ever-aggressive China, China is staging routine, fully armed nuclear deterrence patrols in the South China Sea. Western powers, the UK, the US and their ally Australia have come together to counter China at sea. The US and the UK are helping Australia acquire nuclear-powered submarines. South Korea is now showing interest, by the way, in joining this security partnership. And what about China? Beijing is reportedly on track to have its Type 096 ballistic missile submarine operational before the end of this decade. Analysts are calling this submarine a nightmare. And why is that? Because they will be very, very hard to detect. That's what experts are telling us. China is not only widening its own submarine fleet, but also equipping India's western neighbor. In April, China launched the first of the 8 Hangar-class submarines that it is building for Pakistan. These are diesel-electric attack submarines. The plan is to build 4 of the submarines in China and the remaining 4 in Karachi. Reports say these submarines will have advanced stealth features. They will be fitted with state-of-the-art weapons and sensors. This is India's immediate neighbor we are talking about. The two neighbors have been previously engaged in a naval war. The sinking of Pakistan's submarine PNS Ghazi was a key moment in the 1971 war. So come to think of it, at a time like this, a secret Indian nuclear submarine base makes a lot of sense. Ukraine's defense is crumbling. Russian attacks are more lethal than ever. For the last 2 years, Ukraine has been able to hold the fort, but now it seems like its defense is caving in. And why are we saying that? Because Ukraine is shooting down a far smaller proportion of Russian missile attacks than it was earlier in the war. Have a look at these numbers. In the past 6 months, Ukraine managed to intercept around 46% of Russian missiles. Last month, this figure further fell to 30%. A year ago, the interception rate stood at 73%. As you can see, there has been a steep fall in Ukraine's ability to block Russian missiles. This is according to Western media's analysis of Ukraine's own data. Russia, meanwhile, has significantly ramped up its assault. Over the past 6 months, Moscow fired around 45% more drones and missiles than in the 6 months before. It also doubled the number of Shahed drones attacks, over 2,600 to be specific. It also fired 114 ballistic and 46 hypersonic Kinzhal and Zircon missiles. Last year, the figures were 33 and 27. On top of that, Moscow has also repurposed air defense systems to attack Ukraine and used them to fire 175 missiles into Ukraine this year alone. We are talking about S-300 and S-400 air defense systems here. And how much of it was Ukraine able to intercept? It's pitiful to say the least. It could shoot down just 10% of the ballistic missiles. And as for S-300 and S-400 missiles, it has failed to intercept any of them. Not even a single one. And why is that? Why is Ukraine's defense failing so massively? You see, the Western-supplied Patriot systems are Ukraine's only reliable way to shoot down ballistic S-300 and hypersonic missiles, but Kiev has only a handful of them. And to top it off, it has exhausted the ammunition used in these systems. Russia, meanwhile, is increasingly firing harder to hit weapons. And with that, it's not only destroying Ukrainian infrastructure and cities, but also sapping Kiev's already sparse supply of missiles. And what is Ukraine doing about all of this? Well, there is little it can do but wait for the West to send more Patriots. And this, by the way, can take anywhere between 2 months and several years, depending on whether they will come from existing stockpiles or manufactured on fresh orders. The air war may now come down to which side can outlast the other on missile supplies, and the odds don't seem to be in Ukraine's favor. It is dependent on its Western allies, which are struggling to send missiles on time. Russia, on the other hand, has its own stockpiles, and it's also capable of producing 170 missiles every month. Not to forget the drones and missiles it is getting from its allies. And if the numbers are to be believed, Russia is dominating the battlefield. Then what explains what's going on the political front? If things are going well for Russia, why is Putin shaking up the Kremlin security team? That's right, he has sacked Sergei Shoigu from his long-time position as the country's defense minister. Nobody saw this coming. He is a long-standing Putin confidant. He has served as the defense minister for over 11 years. Now, Shoigu will lead Russia's Security and Defense Council. It's a consultative body that advises the president. But what is the reason behind this? We cannot see. But there are signs that cannot be ignored. Last month itself, Russian officials opened a ground-shaking criminal case into one of Shoigu's deputies. I'm talking about Timur Ivanov. He oversaw military construction projects, including the rebuilding of the destroyed Ukrainian city of Mariupol, now occupied by Russia. For years, he lived high on the hog, flaunted his access to Saint-Tropez villas, yachts, Rolls-Royces, until last month when he got arrested for allegedly taking bribes worth $11 million. Now, this was an ominous sign for Shoigu because Shoigu is himself no stranger to luxury. In fact, according to an investigation by anti-corruption campaigners, he lived in a $15 million pagoda-style complex outside Moscow. It was registered to his sister-in-law and built on land bought by his 18-year-old daughter. I don't need to spell this out. The mansion's ownership was disguised. What's more, since the Ukraine war broke out in 2022, the armed forces under Shoigu have been plagued by rumors of careless spending, mishandling resources, and incompetence. And now President Putin has stepped in to replace him with an experienced technocrat. The reins of the Defense Ministry will now go to former Vice Prime Minister Andrei Belosov. He previously served as the Economic Development Minister and an advisor to Putin. The Kremlin indicated that Belosov was the man for the job, as military spending ballooned to 6.6% of the Russian GDP. Belosov's appointment means that Shoigu moves to head the Security Council. Despite the sense that Shoigu has been ousted, he will still remain in a high-ranking position. The question is Putin trying to keep Shoigu close yet detached from the system? Who's to say? India is creating a new corridor to Russia through Iran. This corridor bypasses Pakistan. What it also does is it counters China's CPEC. At the heart of this corridor is the Chabahar port. It is India's first offshore trading port. Today, India and Iran have signed a 10-year contract for the operation of the Shahid Beheshti terminal in Chabahar port. Our next report telling you more.
This is the Chabahar port in southern Iran and on the Gulf of Oman. This is India's new trading port. New Delhi has signed an agreement with Tehran allowing the former to manage the port for 10 years. This is the first time that India will be managing an overseas port. Why Chabahar? 1. Connectivity. The Chabahar port helps connect India to Afghanistan by passing Pakistan. The port also connects India to Central Asia. 2. Geopolitics. The Chabahar port serves as a counterbalance to Pakistan's Gwadar port. This is where it is on the map, right next to Chabahar. The Gwadar port is managed by China, along with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Gwadar acts as a tool of Chinese influence in the region. Chabahar helps India counter Chinese influence. Reports say landlocked Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have already expressed interest in using Chabahar port to access the Indian market and the Indian Ocean. Armenia too has reportedly expressed interest. 3. Connectivity to Russia. India's management of the Chabahar port is part of a bigger plan. It is meant to connect India to Russia through the International North-South Transport Corridor, or what's called the INSTC. This is a 7,000-plus kilometer-long multi-mode transport route. It was established in the year 2000 by India, Russia and Iran. The corridor's goal is to promote transport and trade between the member states. Over the years, the INSTC has expanded to include 11 new members. These ones: Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Turkey, Ukraine, Belarus, Oman, Syria and Bulgaria. The International North-South Transport Corridor links India to lucrative markets by passing Pakistan. Analysts say the route is 30% cheaper and 40% shorter compared to the current traditional route. This transport corridor also has enormous potential for India's Southeast Asian neighbours. Analysts point out how the Suez Canal route takes 45 to 60 days. In comparison, the INSTC would take 25 to 30 days. The Chabahar port fits right into this bigger plan. This is the Shahid Beheshti terminal. India signed the contract for this terminal in 2016 during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Iran. The contract was subject to annual renewal. 2 years later, the then President of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, visited India. Chabahar was once again discussed. In January this year, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar was in Tehran. Chabahar was discussed again. Cut to today, you have a new agreement giving India its first overseas trading port. The 10-year contract reportedly stands to be automatically renewed. It is a big day and a big win for India. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It's like the Maldives keeps finding a way to humiliate itself every now and then. What has happened this time, you ask? Well, a confession. An embarrassing one at that, by the way. Remember President Mohammad Moizu's India Out campaign? How he had stubbornly insisted that all Indian personnel need to leave the Maldives? Well, guess what? This has come back to bite him. The thing is, Indian personnel did leave, but with them what also left was the Maldives' ability to fly Indian aircraft. And Defence Minister Ghassan Momoon has admitted to it. He has said that the Maldives' military lacks pilots capable of operating the aircraft donated by India. No one in the Maldives National Defence Force is capable of flying them. He said, and I'm quoting now, "As it was a training that required passing various stages, our soldiers had not reached completion due to various reasons. Therefore, there aren't any people in our force at the moment who are licensed or fully operational to fly the 2 helicopters and Dornier aircraft." Why these Indian personnel were there in the Maldives to begin with, you ask? To train Maldivians to fly the aircraft that India had generously donated. But what did Moizu do? He proudly announced that there will be no foreign military presence in the Maldives. He gave Indian troops a deadline to leave. And after many rounds of bilateral discussions, Malé and Berry did reach a compromise. The Indian personnel would leave the Maldives and a technical crew would replace them. It's a team of civilian employees of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. There were total 76 Indian soldiers in the island nation. They returned to India in a phased manner. Maldives Foreign Minister Musa Zamir mentioned that 26 soldiers left Gan in March, 25 left Hanimadu in April, and lastly 25 left Kaddu in May. As promised, India withdrew presence from the Maldives. Moizu basically achieved what he wanted to, but what did he gain? What was the point anyway? The Maldives still lacks pilots to use the aircraft. What is it, if not a shameful display of incompetence? And above all, it still needs Indian assistance to learn to operate the aircraft. Now, I have said this before and I will say it again, despite his hatred for India, Moizu is left with no option but to come begging for help. He did stubbornly demand that Indian troops must leave, but now his administration is struggling to keep the aircraft in the skies. His ministers triggered a row with their statements on India and the Indian Prime Minister, leading to the Maldives tourism taking a hit. But then the Maldives wanted Indian tourists to return, to the point that a major Maldivian tourism body wanted to conduct road shows in India to lure visitors to the Maldives. The tourism body said it wanted to explore ways to boost travel and tourism cooperation with India. It also admitted that India remains a crucial tourist market to the Maldives. But weren't they aware of this before picking fights with India? It seems Moizu has not learned the lesson, a very basic one at that actions have consequences. That if he takes a decision, he will have to put up with the repercussions and the ripple effect. Unfortunately, he cannot have the best of both worlds. America is getting tough with Benjamin Netanyahu. Why do I say that? Because of what Antony Blinken has said. According to the U.S. Secretary of State, the U.S. may block more weapon systems to Israel if it goes ahead with the ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Not just that, Blinken emphasized on the quote-unquote horrible loss of life of innocent civilians. It is a horrible loss indeed. As per Gaza's health ministry, the death toll has now passed at least 35,000 Palestinians. 35,000. This is a serious humanitarian crisis. The Secretary of State also said that he was concerned that any further ground captured by Israel would create a vacuum that's likely to be filled by chaos, by anarchy, and ultimately by Hamas again. Now, before I go on, let me tell you why these statements are extremely significant. This is some of the strongest public criticism coming in from the U.S. government so far of Israel's Gaza assault. So America is getting tough with Israel, but the question is that enough? The thing is, Blinken's remarks do send out a strong message. The message is clear. America will not take lightly Israel's defiance over the Rafah offensive. But is this all that America can do at this point? And will this really deter Benjamin Netanyahu? On Friday, the Biden administration said that Israel's use of U.S.-provided weapons in Gaza likely violated international humanitarian law, but that wartime conditions prevented U.S. officials from determining that for certain in specific airstrikes. And that again was a sign of the U.S. hardening its stance towards Israel. But then the caveat that the administration was not able to link specific U.S. weapons to individual attacks by Israeli forces in Gaza could give the administration leeway in any future decision on whether to restrict provisions of offensive weapons to Israel. According to Blinken, Israel needs to have a clear, credible plan to protect civilians, which, according to him, they have not seen. He also, in fact, warned that Hamas was already seeing a resurgence due to the lack of a coherent, durable plan for Gaza. By the way, Biden on Saturday said that a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war would be possible, quote-unquote, tomorrow if Hamas gave up the hostages seized in its October 7 attack. And Hamas released a statement saying that the remarks by Biden were a setback to negotiations. Let me also tell you about what's happening on the ground. An explosion and several large plumes of smoke were seen rising over Gaza from southern Israel on Sunday as the Israeli military ordered the evacuation of civilians in the southern city of Rafah. Israel sent tanks into eastern Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip after a night of heavy aerial and ground bombardments, killing 19 people and wounding dozens of others, as per the health officials. So the big question still remains. While America is getting tough with Benjamin Netanyahu, will that deter him? It is the 13th of May, and if you are a cocktail lover, here's a reason to say cheers and sip one perhaps, even on Monday, because it is World Cocktail Day, a celebration of the art of mixology. After all, cocktails are not merely beverages, they are expressions of craftsmanship and flavors. The roots of this day tracing back to 1806. That year, the Balance and Columbian Repository, an upstate New York newspaper, first coined the term cocktail. It described cocktail as a stimulating concoction comprising spirits, sugars, waters, and bitters. And where did the word come from? The Oxford English Dictionary tells us that the original use of cocktail was to describe a horse with a tail like a cock's. As in, it stays stuck up rather than hanging down. And this would happen when the racehorse was a mixed breed. And this sense of cocktail then came to mean a mixed or an adulterated drink. The drinks were initially inspired by British punches, which contained spirits, fruit juices, spices in big bowls, Then on, it has been a rather interesting journey. In the 1920s, during the era of prohibition in the US, illegal speakeasies proliferated. And what did these clandestine jazz venues serve? Solace and connection, and refuge from alcohol restrictions in the form of cocktails. The decade changed, and the 1930s witnessed the emergence of the Rainbow Room in New York. It was a luxurious club frequented by elite clientele eager to indulge in post-prohibition cocktails. And since then, the club has closed and reopened. It has been restructured and renovated. But it was its revival in 1987 by Dale Degroff that revitalized interest in classic cocktails and inspired a modern renaissance in mixology. The movement soon spread across the world. It has changed and evolved, become more refined. Today, bartenders, mixologists, cocktail enthusiasts focus on quality ingredients, precise techniques, also creative presentation. They use everything from exotic fruits, herbs, to artisanal spirits and liqueurs to create complex and flavorful cocktails. You see, cocktails have become an expression of art, something to bond over, a vital part of social gatherings, be it a business meeting or a get-together. On that note, we're taking a very short break, but stay with us. Lots more coming up on the other side.
Critical comments on TV against President Kais Saied throws the country in disarray, triggering a lawyer's protest and clashes with the police against a belligerent North African leader. Nigerians divided over Prince Harry and Meghan's visit as the couple stirs controversy with their dress code and protocols. And Libyan Abdel Fattah al-Saadi shares his food and sleeps with predatory animals who have become his pets in Tripoli. World of Africa, at these times on WION, World is One.
And welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us. You are watching Gravitas. This month marks 6 years since theatres reopened in Saudi Arabia following a 35-year ban. And now, years into this newfound freedom, the country's cinema industry is slowly rising like a phoenix from its ashes. More about this in our next report.
Filmmakers from around the world who were once unable to shoot in Saudi Arabia are returning to the streets of the kingdom. And why not? The Saudi Arabia government is trying its best to restore Saudi Arabia's lost cinema glory. From introducing incentives to encouraging young filmmakers and hosting film festivals, the country is leaving no stone unturned to establish Saudiwood. According to reports, Saudi movies are performing well at theatres. The Kingdom's Film Commission has stated that its cumulative box office profits are approaching the $1 billion mark. But how did it all happen? Well, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 is one of the chief factors behind the rise of Saudi Arabia's film industry. The plan aims to make use of government funds to attract local and international investors, as well as forge partnerships with international entertainment companies. In 2019, the Red Sea International Film Festival was launched to attract Arab and international filmmakers. The Saudi Film Commission also organized the 4th edition of the Gulf Cinema Festival this year in April. It was the first time a government agency backed the event. All of these initiatives have boosted the Saudi film production market, which has become the largest consumer market for creative and cinematic content in the Arab world. And why not? According to the 2023 census, 63% of Saudis are under 30 years old. In fact, the shift in attitude towards cinema particularly stands out this year. Nora, the debut feature film of Saudi director Tawfiq Al-Zaidi, is all set to become the first Saudi film to be screened at the 77th Cannes Film Festival. The Kingdom's Film Commission also kicked off Saudi Film Nights in Morocco in April. The initiatives intend to showcase Saudi films in countries like Australia, China, India and Mexico. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Time now for Gravitas Recall, and time now for a story from this day in history. On the 13th of May, 1981, there was an assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. Until then, there was nothing extraordinary about that morning. Pope John Paul II was at the St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. It was his regular scheduled Wednesday general audience. The Pope was passing through thousands of people, blessing them from his open Pope mobile, when suddenly there were gunshots. 1, 2, 3 and 4. 2 bullets hit the Pope. One hit his abdomen, the other his left hand. Pope John Paul II immediately collapsed. The other 2 bullets hit a 60-year-old American woman, Anne Audrey, and 21-year-old Jamaican woman, Rose Hill. Pope John Paul II was rushed to Gemelli Hospital in Rome. He underwent a 5-hour-long surgery. Who had fired the shots? A Turkish man named Mehmet Ali Agca. He was a member of the extremist right-wing organization Grey Wolves. Why did he try to assassinate the Pope? We don't know. Agca once claimed, in fact, he was following God's order. Just 4 days after the assassination attempt, Pope John Paul II said from his hospital bed that he forgave, quote-unquote, The brother who struck me. How did this episode shape history? It forced the Vatican to adopt new security protocol. Also, the Pope mobile is now bulletproof. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.